Jerusalem, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. This is the city that the false Messiah will rule from. This false Messiah is known as the Antichrist, the first beast, the son of perdition. This false Messiah is the rider on the white horse of Revelation 6:2, Islam's Al-Mahdi.
And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer.
Many Muslim scholars, such as Muhammad ibn Izzat and Muhammad Arif, to name a few, say that Islam's Al-Mahdi is the rider on the white horse from the book of Revelation chapter 6 verse 2. This is actually the false Messiah, known as the Antichrist, that will rule from Jerusalem. This is the Caliph that will lead the Caliphate from Jerusalem, known in Islam as Al-Mahdi.
And to be hosted by two remarkable institutions. For over 1,000 years, Al-Azhar has stood as a beacon of Islamic learning. And for over a century, Cairo University has been a source of Egypt's advancement. And together, you represent the harmony between tradition and progress. I'm grateful for your hospitality and the hospitality of the people of Egypt. And I'm also proud to carry with me the goodwill of the American people and a greeting of peace from Muslim communities in my country. Assalamu alaikum. I've come here to Cairo to seek a new beginning between the United States and Muslims around the world.
The Antichrist, which is the Muslims' Al-Mahdi, is known as the Awaited One.
Egypt press lauds Obama, but others skeptical. June 4th, 2009. Egypt's press lavished praise on U.S. President Barack Obama on Friday for ending the, quote, clash of civilizations, end quote. But other Arab newspapers cautioned that he may have won their hearts, but not their minds. Quote, Obama the awaited, end quote, trumpeted a giant front-page headline in Egypt's independent Al-Masri Al-Yom, drawing parallels to the Mahdi, who in Muslim culture is believed will appear before the end of time as savior, like the second coming of Christ.
there must be a sustained effort to listen to each other, to learn from each other, to respect one another, and to seek common ground. As the Holy Quran tells us, be conscious of God and speak always the truth.
Obama quotes the Quran saying, "Speak always the truth." In Islam, taqiyya is a form of religious dissimulation, an acceptable form of deception in which one can conceal the truth, or a legal dispensation whereby a believing individual can deny his faith or commit otherwise illegal or blasphemous acts while they are at risk of significant persecution. Even claiming to be a Christian while not actually being a Christian, according to taqiyya, is acceptable.
That is what I will try to do today, to speak the truth as best I can. Now, part of this conviction is rooted in my own experience. I'm a Christian, but my father came from a Kenyan family that includes generations of Muslims. As a boy, I spent several years in Indonesia and heard the call of the azan at the break of dawn and at the fall of dusk.
In Islam, it is believed that the Al-Mahdi will be a world political leader who will fight against the enemies of Islam and lead a world revolution ruling over the non-Muslim world to establish a new Islamic world order. Muslim author Sadiq M.A. Villiencourt, in his book Doomsday Portents and Prophecies, says, quote, "The Mahdi will establish right and justice in the world and eliminate evil and corruption. He will fight against the enemies of Muslims who would be victorious."
So I have known Islam on 3 continents before coming to the region where it was first revealed. That experience guides my conviction that partnership between America and Islam must be based on what Islam is, not what it isn't. And I consider it part of my responsibility as President of the United States to fight against negative stereotypes of Islam wherever they appear.
The primary 2 sects within Islam consist of the Sunnis and the Shias. The Sunni faction is the larger of the 2, as can be observed in this map. The Muslim Brotherhood, which adheres to the Sunni doctrinal belief, was founded in Egypt in 1928. The Muslim Brotherhood is the most powerful Islamic religious, political, and social movement in the world. In 1928, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Amin al-Husseini, joined the Muslim Brotherhood. A few years later, he led a Nazi SS division of Muslim Nazis. In 1944, he became co-founder and president of the Arab League. In 1946, he became the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood in Jerusalem. Today, the Arab League, officially called the League of Arab States, is a regional organization that carries out many of the objectives of the Muslim Brotherhood. The region controlled by the Arab League can be observed in this map. The influence and political domination of both the Arab League and the Muslim Brotherhood working together is currently taking place in the region. The end goal of the Arab League and Muslim Brotherhood is to oust out government leaders and any other faction of Islam that do not go along with the agenda to form a caliphate.
Notice how the region is mapped for the Arab League. as it bears resemblance of a former caliphate that existed from 661 to 750 AD, known as the Umayyad Caliphate. Now let us take a look at how Barack Hussein Obama has been helping the Muslim Brotherhood gain power and is currently helping form a new caliphate.
I've come here to Cairo to seek a new beginning between the United States and Muslims around the world. Those are mutual interests. That is the world we seek. But we can only achieve it together. I know there are many, Muslim and non-Muslim, who question whether we can forge this new beginning.
Ikhwan Web, the Muslim Brotherhood's official English website, reported on March 7, 2011, that the Muslim Brotherhood calls on the Arab League to intervene in Libya. Quote, "A prominent member of the Egypt-based Muslim Brotherhood's Executive Bureau has called on the Arab League and Arab countries to intervene in Libya to end the crisis." End of quote. The article further goes on to say, quote, El Arian said the Muslim Brotherhood backs the anti-government protesters in their struggle to force Gaddafi to step down. End of quote.
March 30th, 2011. Reuters reports, exclusive, Obama authorizes secret help for Libya rebels. Quote, President Barack Obama has signed a secret order authorizing covert U.S. government support for rebel forces seeking to oust Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. Government officials told Reuters on Wednesday. Obama signed the order known as a presidential, quote, finding, end quote, within the last 2 or 3 weeks, according to government sources familiar with the matter. Such findings are a principal form of presidential directive used to authorize secret operations by the Central Intelligence Agency. End quote. This is just one of many facts that show President Barack Hussein Obama is using CIA operatives and jackals to help the uprising in the Middle East, to help the Muslim Brotherhood form their caliphate, and to seat their people in positions of power.
When it's over, the former rebels will declare victory over the whole country, even though other pockets of resistance remain. None of them will be as hard to dislodge as the die-hard Gaddafi loyalists hiding out in the place where he was born.
The United States and the entire world continues to be outraged by the appalling violence against the Libyan people. The United States is helping to lead an international effort to deter further violence. We will continue to send a clear message. Muammar Gaddafi has lost legitimacy to lead, and he must leave.
Publicly, the Muslim Brotherhood acknowledged it did not want Gaddafi in power. Publicly, Barack Obama made it clear he wanted Gaddafi to leave power. Not long after these public statements, Gaddafi was captured alive and murdered. What is the result of Gaddafi no longer holding power in Libya? The result is the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood into power. July 5th, 2012. An article by The Right Scoop is titled, Muslim Brotherhood set to lead Libyan government after upcoming elections. Quote, it's like pieces of the Islamic Caliphate puzzle, one by one, are coming together. Libya's top politicians have hatched a deal that would see the Muslim Brotherhood lead the government after the country's first free elections in almost 5 decades takes place on Sunday. While the elections for a 200-member National Congress is unlikely to grant a majority to any one faction, the Muslim Brotherhood and its Islamist allies are confident they can join their counterparts in Tunisia and Egypt at the helm of leadership. Negotiations between the Muslim Brotherhood and a secular-based political movement led by former interim Prime Minister Mohammad Jibril have focused on forming a post-election government as soon as the result is known. An advisor to Mr. Jibril said the former PM was likely to take the post of figurehead president with Mustafa Abu Shagur, currently interim deputy prime minister of the Muslim Brotherhood, taking the prime minister's slot as head of government. The Muslim Brotherhood would dominate the ministries. End of quote.
One of the reasons why the Muslim Brotherhood was against the Gaddafi regime in Libya was because the Muslim Brotherhood under Gaddafi's rule were not allowed to be legitimate organization operating inside Libya. We see here in the Saudi Gazette, August 7, 2012, Libya officially recognizes the Muslim Brotherhood. Quote, "The Muslim Brotherhood has been officially approved as a civil institution in Libya by the Ministry of Culture and Civil Society. It submitted its application on May 24th. It is registered as a community service and public awareness organization. Bashir Kibti, General Secretary of the Muslim Brotherhood in Libya, said that the group's legitimacy was based on the fact that it had been operating in Libya since 1949 and had continued to exist under the Gaddafi regime despite the dictator's laws against such organizations." End quote. Islam teaches that before the final forming of the caliphate, when the Mahdi is revealed, takes over Jerusalem and becomes the caliph of it, there will first be armies from the east carrying black flags or banners of war. The black flag is called Ar-Raya and is used by the Muslim army. It is also called the flag of jihad and is carried into battle. Answeringislam.org declares and properly states on Chapter 4, the Mahdi, Islam's awaited Messiah, quote, "Islamic tradition pictures the Mahdi as joining with the army of Muslim warriors carrying black flags. The Mahdi will then lead this army to Israel and reconquer it for Islam. The Jews will be slaughtered until very few remain, and Jerusalem will become the location of the Mahdi's rule over the earth." End quote. This is why we see Muslims in Libya calling for Sharia law carrying black flags. They are calling for the Mahdi to take Jerusalem and to form a caliphate, an Islamic state headed by the Mahdi. This is parallel to the rise of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. In these last days, it is through Islam that this occurs.
Chanting "the people want an Islamic state, the people want Sharia," and staging a military parade, the protesters confirmed that they would protect the sanctity of Sharia with their lives, believing that all atrocities and misfortunes the country has been plagued with are due to the Muslim desertion of Islamic traditions. The protesters, who are described by some secular activists as radical Islamic groups, argue that the one and only path for salvation is by clinging on the Islamic values.
We have become a weak nation. That is exactly what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said. All nations are about to come against you Muslims, as you have become as trivial as foam. This is just because you have deserted the God's law.
Waving flags and banners, preachers have demanded imposing Islamic values that have been denied in practice rather than in theory for 4 decades, arguing that it is now time for cleansing the homelands of Islam from filth and positivist laws that have been inherited from the West and ruined the Islamic nation for ages. Waving black flags imposed with "I bear witness there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is the Prophet of Allah." Sharia guardians are determined to retain the Islamic law and also adopt the Palestinian case.
We are the nation of Islam. We have to cling on to Sharia law, especially to liberate Palestine. I'm sure that once we come back to the law of Allah, we will regain Palestine.
In Libya, one of the most conservative Islamic countries, there are absolutely no non-Muslim communities, with the possible exception of individual expatriates. Secular dictatorship that ruled the country for 42 years of repression came to an end by what is so-called the Arab Spring upheaval.
After the removal of Gaddafi, we see the Transitional National Council get access to $30 billion by the United States. This regime change is all happening in the name of democracy, a total smokescreen. July 15th, 2011, New York Times. Libya rebels get formal backing and $30 billion. Istanbul. The United States formally recognized the rebel leadership in Libya as the country's legitimate government on Friday, allowing the rebel government access to $30 billion in Libyan assets held in the United States. It is not yet clear how and when the money would be released. Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton said at an international gathering held to discuss the Libyan conflict that Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi's government no longer had any legitimacy, and that the United States would join more than 30 countries in extending diplomatic recognition to the main opposition group known as the Transitional National Council. Quote, "We will help the Transitional National Council sustain its commitment to the sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity, and national unity of Libya," end quote, Mrs. Clinton said.
Wikipedia describes theocracy in the following way. Quote, "Theocracy is a form of government in which official policy is governed by immediate divine guidance or by officials who are regarded as, or claim to be, divinely guided, or is pursuant to the doctrine of a particular religion or religious group." It goes on to say further, "An Islamic state is a state that has adopted Islam, specifically Sharia, as its foundations for political institutions or laws exclusively and has implemented the Islamic ruling system, Khilafah, and is therefore a theocracy." End of quote. We see that the $30 billion that we just referred to went straight to the agenda of forming a theocratic Islamic state, not a democratic state. 1 year later, July 5th, 2012, Aram Online reports Sharia should be main source of Libya legislation, according to National Transitional Council. Quote, "Libya's National Transitional Council says that Islamic law should be the main source of legislation as the people are attached to Islam as religion and legislation." Libya's outgoing National Transitional Council said on Thursday that Islamic law, Sharia, should be the main source of legislation and that this should not be subject to a referendum. Quote, "The Libyan people are attached to Islam as a religion and legislation," end of quote. National Transitional Council spokesman Salah Daraoub said, reading from a statement, quote, "As such, the National Transitional Council recommends that the next Congress make Sharia the main source of legislation," end of quote. Some have accurately warned that in the aftermath of a toppled Gaddafi regime, the emergence of the Muslim Brotherhood into positions of political power and the rise of Sharia law would occur. April 14th, 2011, WorldNet Daily reports Gaddafi fall means ascent of Muslim Brotherhood. Former ambassador says organization's members already part of society. Quote, Washington. A representative of Libya's rebel Transitional National Council says radical Islamists such as members of the Muslim Brotherhood could have a role in a democratic post-Gaddafi government. This has some prominent observers worried radical Islamists could use the power of the ballot to take over, much as they did in Iran after Shah was deposed. The article goes on to say, former CIA Director James Woolsey sees a threat of collaboration between the Muslim Brotherhood and Iran in a post-Gaddafi Libya. Woolsey is worried that radical Islamists could push out more moderate elements in Libya, just as the Ayatollah Khomeini did following Iran's revolution. Quote, the thing that bothers me is that revolutions have historically, in a large number of cases, although not all, had pretty bad third acts, Woolsey said. I think the Muslim Brotherhood organizations are likely going to try to look like moderates for some time. And then, when they feel they have the upper hand, they will try to establish a caliphate or establish Sharia law. End of quote.
The Muslim Brotherhood is the second largest party inside the new assembly for the Libyan government. August 8, 2012, Huffington Post reports Libya's transitional rulers hand over power. Quote, Tripoli, Libya. In a ceremony late Wednesday, Libya's first elected assembly took over power from the transitional council that has ruled the country since last year's uprising against longtime dictator Muammar Gaddafi. The timetable calls for the new assembly to name a president within a day and then form a government within 30 days of its first session late Wednesday. There are three main blocks in the new assembly: Islamists, including the Muslim Brotherhood, and ultra-conservative Salafis, liberals and moderates, led by wartime Prime Minister Mahmoud Jibril, and a bloc of independents. End quote. With the help of Barack Hussein Obama, the Muslim Brotherhood has now come to power in Libya.
Both the Muslim Brotherhood and Arab League headquarters are stationed in Cairo, Egypt. This makes Egypt a hub for the agenda of forming a caliphate in the Middle East.
Al-Azhar University in Cairo is the chief Islamic learning center in the world. Al-Azhar has several connections with the Muslim Brotherhood. For example, Hassan al-Banna, founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, graduated from an affiliate of Al-Azhar University. Also, Amin al-Husseini, former leader of the Muslim Brotherhood in Jerusalem, studied Islamic law at Al-Azhar before he went on to lead recruiting of the Nazi SS Muslim division. It was from Al-Azhar that we earlier heard Barack Hussein Obama make the following statements in his speech.
I've come here to Cairo to seek a new beginning between the United States and Muslims around the world.
It was at this very speech that 10 Muslim Brotherhood members sat in the audience as invited guests. The day before the speech, The Atlantic reports on June 3, 2009, quote, Brotherhood, end quote, invited to Obama speech by the United States. Quote, a sign that the Obama administration is willing to publicly challenge Egypt's commitment to parliamentary democracy. Various Middle Eastern news sources report that the administration insisted that at least 10 members of the Muslim Brotherhood, the country's chief opposition party, be allowed to attend his speech in Cairo on Thursday, end quote.
Several articles confirm this Muslim Brotherhood invitation. Another article, which came out June 3rd, 2009, from Fox News, is titled, Muslim Brotherhood Members to Attend Obama's Cairo Speech. Quote, Egyptian lawmakers from the fundamentalist Muslim Brotherhood are expected to attend President Obama's highly anticipated speech to the Muslim world Thursday in Cairo. Khaled Hamza, editor of the Muslim Brotherhood website, confirmed to FoxNews.com that 10 members of the Brotherhood's parliamentary bloc received official invitations to attend the speech. It goes on to say, the expected attendance of the Brotherhood members already is stirring some criticism from conservatives in the U.S., who say they do not represent the kind of moderate Muslims Obama should be appealing to. Quote, what kind of signal are we sending? End of quote, said Representative Pete Hoekstra, ranking Republican on the House Intelligence Committee, warning that such an invitation will be seen as more as a sign of weakness than strength. Quote, I think the president takes some big risks by unilaterally putting out these olive branches. End of quote. The uprisings in the Middle East, known as the Arab Spring, have been engineered to bring about a caliphate. The Muslim Brotherhood, being a key player in this regime change in the Middle East, are politically backing the protests. We saw this in Libya, and the same is true for Egypt as well. For this reason, former Egyptian President Mubarak was rounding up Muslim Brotherhood leaders during protests in an effort to stop the regime change and Muslim Brotherhood takeover. January 28, 2011, Huffington Post reports using Reuters as a source. Muslim Brotherhood arrests reported as Egypt protests continue. Quote, Cairo, January 28th, Reuters. Egypt rounded up members of the Muslim Brotherhood, including at least 8 senior leaders of the group, ahead of planned countrywide protests on Friday, a lawyer representing the detained men said. A security source confirmed that authorities had ordered a crackdown on the group overnight. Quote, we have orders for security sweeps of the Brotherhood. End of quote, the source told Reuters. The Muslim Brotherhood has not been behind 3 days of protests by youth angry at poor living standards and authoritarian rule, but many followers of the group are expected to join demonstrations on Friday after weekly prayers. The government issued warnings to youth demonstrators not to allow the Brotherhood to use protests for what the authorities described as its, quote, hidden agenda, end quote.
Although Mubarak was indeed a corrupt leader along with the authorities under his rule, they were correct in identifying the Muslim Brotherhood as having a hidden agenda. This hidden agenda of the Muslim Brotherhood is that of taking positions of political power in the Middle East to form an Islamic caliphate with Jerusalem as its capital. Their goal is to remove any leader in power that opposes this plan. Barack Hussein Obama is siding with the opposition party of the Muslim Brotherhood in several ways, including aiding their move to positions of power by supporting the ousting of any leaders in the way of the caliphate agenda.
February 1st, 2011, ABC News reports. Barack Obama urges Hosni Mubarak's departure. Calls Egyptian protesters, quote, inspiration, end quote. Quote, President Obama today told embattled Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak that relinquishing power was the right decision, but the transition to a new government, quote, must begin now, end quote. Though the White House had carefully avoided a firm position on the protests in Egypt for the first several days of demonstrations, today the president stated openly that he supports a new regime in Egypt. Quote, an orderly transition must be meaningful, end quote, he said. Quote, it must be peaceful and it must begin now, end quote. Obama also praised the peaceful demonstrators in Egypt, calling them an, quote, inspiration to people around the world, end quote.
These protests have opened an opportunity for the Muslim Brotherhood to gain a foothold and voice in relations with the Egyptian government they have never had before. February 5th, 2011, Voice of America reports, protests continue in Egypt. Muslim Brotherhood joins crisis talks. Quote, Egypt's largest opposition group, the Muslim Brotherhood, is participating in unprecedented talks with the government, as protesters calling for an end to President Hosni Mubarak's nearly 30-year rule rallied for a 13th day. The article goes on to say the newly appointed Egyptian Vice President, Omar Suleiman, met with a coalition of opposition groups, including representatives of the Muslim Brotherhood. Egyptian government officials have never before openly met the Islamist group, which is officially banned in Egypt. End quote. We see as things progress, the Muslim Brotherhood starts creeping in, making demands to jockey for position to take over the Egyptian government. February 6, 2011, Haaretz reports, Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood. People's demands are clear. Mubarak must step down. Quote, Brotherhood spokesman addressed to protesters in Cairo's Tahrir Square as the group held talks with the Vice President Suleiman over how to resolve Egypt's crisis. A spokesman for Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood spoke to thousands of protesters gathered in Cairo's Tahrir Square on Sunday, while the group held talks with the Vice President over how to resolve the crisis in Egypt. Quote, we are starting a round of talks to know how serious they are about responding to the demands of the people, end quote. Spokesman Gamal Nassar told the German press agency DPA, quote, the demands of the people are clear. Mubarak must step down, end quote. The statement indicated that the group would not be willing to move forward in negotiations with the government without this demand being met, end quote.
Let me close by saying a few words about the situation in Egypt. It's also clear that there needs to be a transition process that begins now.
The Muslim Brotherhood makes their demands clear. The president of Egypt, Mubarak, must step down. This sentiment is echoed through Barack Obama as he emphasizes a, quote, transition now, end quote. The outcome that has been planned from the beginning is a transition into a Muslim Brotherhood-dominated Egypt. In the name of democracy, once again, it is actually a theocracy at play. We see the transition for this government begins, and some fear that the Muslim Brotherhood will take power during the election. New York Times reports, March 30th, 2011. Elections in Egypt by the fall, leaders say. Cairo. Egypt's military rulers announced an interim constitution Wednesday and said presidential elections would be held by November. Both important steps in their plan for getting out of the daily business of governing the country. The article goes on to say, many of the young liberals who helped bring about Mr. Mubarak's overthrow wanted more time for the election, fearing that an early vote would give an overwhelming advantage to well-organized groups like the Muslim Brotherhood and the now deposed National Democratic Party, which once ruled virtually unopposed. The result of Mubarak stepping down provided a perfect opportunity of a Muslim Brotherhood rise to power. That is exactly what happens as no coincidence. Elections come and the Muslim Brotherhood-backed candidate wins, all according to the plan. Huffington Post, June 17, 2012. Egypt election results. Muslim Brotherhood declares Mohammed Morsi victory. Quote, Cairo. The Muslim Brotherhood declared early Monday that its candidate, Mohammed Morsi, won Egypt's presidential election, which would be the first victory of an Islamist as head of state in the stunning wave of protests demanding democracy that swept the Middle East the past year. But the military handed itself the lion's share power over the new president, sharpening the possibility of confrontation. End of quote. The Muslim Brotherhood now have control over Egypt.
A year earlier, before Mohammed Morsi became president, it was made clear that the Muslim Brotherhood agenda reaches far beyond Egypt. The Blaze reports June 25th, 2011, quote, the United States of Islam, end of quote. Muslim Brotherhood spokesman calls on Arab youth to launch a new revolution in the West and establish a global Islamic state. The Middle East Media Research Institute reports that in an, quote, interview with the Egyptian daily Al-Sharuk, Dr. Kamal al-Helbawi, former Muslim Brotherhood spokesman in the West, called upon the Arab youth to launch a new revolution that would eliminate the borders drawn by imperialist nations and bring about the establishment of a global Islamic state called, quote, the United States of Islam, end of quote. According to al-Helbawi, the Muslim Brotherhood is active in approximately 80 countries and strives to realize the dream of becoming a global organization. End of quote. The common ideological fuel, that is the support of an Islamic caliphate with Jerusalem as its capital, is seen here by the prominent Egyptian cleric Safwat Higazi at the Muslim Brotherhood-backed Mohammed Morsi presidential campaign rally before his win. This is the man, Mohammed Morsi, that now rules as the president of Egypt.
قالوا الدستور قرآننا كأن الدستور حاجة عظيمة جدا يعني لكن الإمام البنا رحمة الله عليه قال لهم لا بل القرآن دستورنا بل القرآن دستورنا كان وسيبقى سيظل القرآن دستورنا القرآن دستورنا والرسول زعيمنا والجهاد سبيلنا والموت في سبيل الله أسمى أمانينا وفوق كل ذلك الله غايتنا الشريعة ثم الشريعة ثم الشريعة ولا خير في هذه الأمة ولا خير لهذه الأمة لا خير فيها ولا خير لها ولا نهضة إلا بالشريعة الإسلامية.
The president of Egypt has been pushing for Sharia law as a means to an Islamic state, using jihad to pave the way towards a caliphate. It's in the interest of the Muslim Brotherhood and other Sunni Islamists to do so, in order to establish the caliphate with Jerusalem as its capital, which will have the Al-Mahdi as their leader. AnsweringIslam.org, Chapter 4, The Mahdi, Islam's Awaited Messiah. In the section entitled, The Ruler of the World, it states, quote, the Mahdi is believed to be a future Muslim world leader who will not only rule over the Islamic world, but also the non-Muslim world as well. The Mahdi is said to lead a world revolution that will establish a new Islamic world order throughout the entire earth. The Mahdi will establish right and justice in the world and eliminate evil and corruption. He will fight against the enemies of the Muslims who would be victorious. He will reappear on the appointed day, and then he will fight against the forces of evil, lead a world revolution, and set up a new world order based on justice, righteousness, and virtue. Ultimately, the righteous will take the world administration in their hands, and Islam will be victorious over all the religions. He is the precursor of the victory of the truth and the fall of all tyrants. He heralds the end of injustice and oppression and the beginning of the final rising of the sun of Islam, which will never again set and which will ensure happiness and the elevation of mankind. It goes on to say, the Mahdi is one of Allah's clear signs which will soon be made evident to everyone. The Mahdi's means and method of accomplishing this world revolution will include multiple military campaigns or holy wars, jihad. Abdullah Rahman Kalani, author of The Last Apocalypse, describes the many battles of the Mahdi. Quote, Al-Mahdi will receive a pledge of allegiance as a caliph for Muslims. He will lead Muslims in many battles of jihad. His reign will be a caliphate that follows the guidance of the Prophet. Many battles will ensue between Muslims and the disbelievers during the Mahdi's reign. In the section entitled, The Army of Black Flags, it states, quote, the Mahdi's ascendancy to power is said to be preceded by an army from the east who will be carrying black flags or banners of war, end of quote. The article goes on to refer to the Al-Mahdi as one conquering Jerusalem with jihad for the caliphate capital. The section entitled, The Conquering of Israel, states, quote, Islamic tradition pictures the Mahdi as joining with the army of Muslim warriors carrying black flags. The Mahdi will then lead this army to Israel and reconquer it for Islam. The Jews will be slaughtered until very few remain, and Jerusalem will become the location of the Mahdi's rule over the earth. End of quote.
The Antichrist, known as the first beast, will be heralded by those following Islam who are worshiping Allah. This is the devil known as the dragon. This political leader, the Al-Mahdi, with the support of those following him, who are Muslims, will make war, which is jihad. And in Revelation 13:4, this is made clear. It says, "And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" Some Muslims will say that jihad is not war or military jihad, or even say that it's not violent at all, but this is not true. They are practicing taqiyya. On a Muslim source, justislam.co.uk, the true meaning of jihad, according to their own writings, under the article section Jihad by the Sword, it says, Jihad by the sword in Arabic is jihad bis saif. The article goes on to say, quote, "Sometimes it is necessary to undertake jihad by the sword. This would include usage of arsenals and engaging in a combat. This could be simply a bunch of freedom fighters or an organized campaign of army. Jihad by the sword is use of arms to engage into a combat." The article goes on to explain there are two situations where jihad by the sword is allowed to be undertaken. Number one, for self-defense, and number two, fighting against evil and unjust. End of quote. One of the characteristics of the Al-Mahdi, according to Islam, is that he will fight against the forces of evil and injustice.
In a quest to form an Islamic caliphate using jihad, the Muslims plan to impose jizya tax on any non-Muslim. According to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, jizya is defined as, quote, "a capitation tax formally levied on non-Muslims by an Islamic state," end of quote. In the following article, we see the president of Egypt, Mohamed Morsi, calling for this very jizya tax during his campaign. In an article out of gatestoneinstitute.org titled, "Christians Should Convert, Pay Tribute, or Leave," says Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood candidate, dated May 30th, 2012, it reads, quote, "They need to know that conquest is coming, that Egypt will be Islamic, and that they must pay jizya or immigrate," end of quote, Morsi reportedly said. According to the popular Egyptian website Al-Bashir, Mohamed Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood presidential candidate, just declared that he will, quote, "achieve the Islamic conquest, fath, of Egypt for the second time and make all Christians convert to Islam or else pay the jizya," end of quote. The additional Islamic tax or financial tribute required of non-Muslims, or financial tribute. In a brief report written by Samuel al-Ashay and published by al-Bashir on May 27th, Morsi allegedly made these comments while speaking with a journalist at the headquarters of the Muslim Brotherhood's Freedom and Justice Party, adding, quote, "We will not allow Ahmed Shafiq, his contending presidential candidate, or anyone else to impede our second Islamic conquest of Egypt," end of quote. There is clearly a loud call for an Islamic state in Egypt. This is part of a larger agenda to have a full Islamic caliphate throughout the region, with Jerusalem as its capital. An article out of the JerusalemPost.com dated October 13th, 2012 reads, "Brotherhood head calls for, quote, jihad, end of quote, to liberate Jerusalem." Quote, Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood spiritual leader Muhammad Badi called on Muslims worldwide to liberate Jerusalem by means of jihad, according to AFP. In his weekly message to supporters, Badi reportedly asserted that, quote, "the jihad for the recovery of Jerusalem is a duty for all Muslims," end of quote, stressing that the city's conquest, quote, "will not be done through negotiations or at the United Nations," end of quote. quote. Obama is directly supporting this jihad in the Middle East. An article out of the Examiner.com dated December 7, 2012 reads, Egypt. Obama sends Muslim Brotherhood rulers more tanks and fighter jets. Quote, for the new Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood-dominated government, the Obama administration is ensuring another $1.3 billion annual shipment of state-of-the-art weaponry. End of quote. The following month, after Obama is ensuring another $1.3 billion for weapons to Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood comes out with a statement regarding the government of Israel. An article out of the English.alarabia.net dated January 2, 2013 reads, Israel will not exist within a decade, says Muslim Brotherhood official. Quote, a senior Egyptian official who also serves as an advisor to President Mohamed Morsi said on Tuesday that Israel will cease to exist within a decade. End of quote. 2 months later, Obama not only fails to condemn these statements, but in fact continues in favor of Egypt and further gives financial support. An article out of the Examiner.com dated March 3, 2013 reads, despite sequestration, Obama gives Egypt $450 million. Quote, on Sunday, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry announced that the Obama administration will immediately hand over $250 million to the government of Egypt, based on President Mohamed Morsi's promises of political reform. Quote, the United States can and wants to do more, end of quote, Kerry said in a statement. In fact, the Obama administration plans to, quote, do more, end of quote, as the $250 million is part of a larger package of financial aid pledged to the Egyptian government, currently led by the Muslim Brotherhood organization, end of quote. It becomes evident that the actions of Barack Hussein Obama are helping the Islamic agenda using his unique political position of power. As the Antichrist and Al-Mahdi, Obama is using and will continue to use Islam as a platform to persecute Christians. This will fully manifest later after the caliphate is formed and Obama is heralded as the awaited one in the middle of the 7-year tribulation. Speaking about the Antichrist, Revelation 13:7 states, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. An article out of frontpagemag.com dated June 25, 2013 is titled, Obama to Egyptian Christians, Don't Protest the Brotherhood. Quote, indeed, the U.S. ambassador's position as the Brotherhood's lackey is disturbing and revealing on several levels. First, all throughout the Middle East, the U.S. has been supporting anyone and everyone opposing their leaders. In Libya against Gaddafi, in Egypt itself against 30-year U.S. ally Mubarak, and now in Syria against Assad. In all these cases, the U.S. has presented its support in the name of the human rights and freedoms of the people against dictatorial leaders. So why is the Obama administration now asking Christians not to oppose their rulers? In this case, Islamists. It goes on, among other things, under Morsi's rule, the persecution of Copts has practically been legalized as unprecedented numbers of Christians, men, women, and children have been arrested, often receiving more than double the maximum prison sentence, under the accusation that they, quote, blasphemed, end of quote, Islam and or its prophet. The article goes on to say, and the targeting of Christian children for abduction, ransom, rape, and or forced conversion has also reached unprecedented levels under Morsi. It goes on, in other words, and consistent with Obama administration's doctrine, when Islamists, including rapists and cannibals, wage jihad on secular leaders, the U.S. supports them. When Christians protest Islamist rulers who are making their lives a living hell, the administration asks them to, quote, know their place, end of quote, and behave like dhimmis, Islam's appellation for non-Muslim, quote, infidels, end of quote, who must live as third-class, quote, citizens, end of quote, and never complain about their inferior status, end of quote. Obama obviously has deep connections with the Muslim Brotherhood, supporting them in any way that he possibly can. It therefore should not come as a surprise to see him meeting with these caliphate-supporting jihadists. An article out of IsraelNationalNews.com dated June 26, 2013 is titled, White House Hosts Israel-Hating Radical Muslim. Quote, White House officials met this month with Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayah, a deputy of radical Egyptian cleric Yusuf al-Qaradawi, the spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, who has been banned from entering the United States, reported the Investigative Project on Terrorism. The June 13th meeting took place on the same day the Obama administration announced plans to arm Syria's rebel forces, the report noted, end of quote. An article out of FoxNews.com dated June 21, 2013 is titled, As Egypt Unravels, Team Obama Increases Support for Muslim Brotherhood. Quote, Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood President Mohamed Morsi made international headlines this week as he appointed Adel al-Khayyat as governor of Luxor, an ancient Egyptian city that is key tourist destination. The problem with Mr. Khayyat? He just happens to lead the quote-unquote political arm of a terrorist organization that massacred tourists in Luxor in 1997. The details of the attack are beyond grisly, with many of the dead disemboweled and notes, quote, praising Islam, end of quote, placed inside their mutilated bodies. The article goes on to say, against this backdrop of Sharia and jihad, and hidden behind the blanket news coverage of the Obama administration's other scandals, the White House has decided to increase its financial support for the Muslim Brotherhood, quietly clearing the way for the U.S. to give Egypt $1.3 billion in military aid. Goes on to say, think about this for a moment. The Obama administration, through the Mubarak regime, for all its flaws, a stalwart American ally that kept peace with Israel, under the bus ostensibly because of its human rights violations, but is waiving human rights conditions to prop up a more brutal jihadist government. Let's not forget the motto of the Muslim Brotherhood. Quote, Allah is our objective, the Prophet is our leader, the Quran is our law, jihad is our way, dying in the way of Allah is our highest hope. End of quote. So far, we have scratched the surface in unveiling the plots and agendas of Barack Hussein Obama, leading the world into a satanic new world order. This powerful political leader is uniquely devastating the global scene. Barack Hussein Obama is effectively lying, killing, stealing, and destroying on an unprecedented scale that will only continue to grow. He is bearing the fruit of his father, Satan himself. John 10:10. The thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. John 8:44. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it.